There we go. Carolyn, Jessica.
Morning.
Morning. How are you?
Good. Oh, my microphone's really down. I'm trying not to I have my door shut so I don't give Carolyn feedback.
So Jessica, do you still have your fancy hairdo?
Yeah, I do.
Look at you. Look at you. I look forward to seeing your hairdo whenever I hear your voice, you know.
Yeah, I just had to run an errand at Walmart, and I was at self-checkout, and the woman who was there helping, she was older, but she had like the buzz sides and like a longer top, and so we had to bond over our hairdos.
I think I'm gonna get that too.
Yeah, go for it. You know, Halloween's coming up. I feel like they should make a wig like my hair.
Yeah. I yeah. Well, we'll see who.
Yeah, let's see who comes on.
Yeah. We should have an interesting discussion if people get involved in it, and hopefully
cool.
A productive one too, because I would like to run past a few in air quotes solutions, things that people can do on this that don't require necessarily joining an organization or something like that, but things that they could do on a low scale with you know, friends, family, church, or just themselves. You know?
Oh, cool.
So if we get any takers, more than
one thing I've been thinking about, I know that a lot of people like to watch this program later on Facebook, and so I've been brainstorming, trying to figure out how we could get those people more involved if possible.
Yeah, or at least send some stuff in the chat, you know, if they have questions or comments or something like that in the Facebook comments.
Yeah.
You know, if they could, you know, just get involved with the process, you know, that would add more voices to the thing.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, I'm watching Facebook too. So if anybody does comment during the presentation, I'll throw them in the chat for you, Lawrence.
Okay. Okay. There's a wild character there.
Yeah.
Old Lynn.
Yep. Yeah, so I don't know how to with everybody's, you know, schedules and joining at different times via Facebook. Like I said, when we're not live, it'd be cool to figure out a way to bring that in. I don't know.
Sure.
I'll gotta think some more.
That would be useful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Lee Raines, who usually shows up and has some interesting comments, she got a conflicting post, you know, I mean, meaning that she had a volunteer thing that she was doing, that something switched. She sent me an email to that effect a while ago.
I was gonna say, I usually see Lee hanging out in these brainstorming sessions.
Yeah. So she said she would. Sometimes she might come, but it was a conflict in the time thing.
Sure.
How's Lynn doing?
Hey, Lawrence, how you doing?
Good, man. How about yourself?
Been a busy summer.
Yeah. So doing what?
Yeah. I've been all over actually. Just got inducted in Cowboy Hall of Fame. Went to DC, North Carolina. Atlanta, Virginia, on and on. Kind of have a cold, so I'm just kind of nursing a cold right now. So,
Oh, really?
but other than that, I have no complaints. I was just wanting to hear what people had to say today.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well,
I,
I hope we'll hear what you have to say too.
yeah, I will. Due to my voice, I won't be speaking much, but I'll be listening.
All right. Yeah. How about Gabrielle? How are you doing, Gabrielle?
I'm doing good this morning.
Okay, good. Well, we'll hope that the people who are here will have some input on this, because I think there are some solutions or things that we can do. So one, we don't, if you don't have anything you feel like you can do, you can feel hopeless, and these persistent problems can feel that you can't do anything except suffer and feel bad. And I don't find that productive, especially when that is not, in fact, the case.
Yeah, I agree. I live on the Lake Traverse Reservation, and so there's a lot of adversity there.
Mm.
And so
You say adversity or diversity?
adversity.
Oh, adversity. Okay.
Yeah, and so I think that's a real challenge to deal with the historical past and the legacy of the trauma that people endured.
Yep.
But to be able to think of a present and future where there's action items, where people can take action and be optimistic about creating change.
Mhm, mhm.
And
Right.
so I look for dialogue and conversations that promote optimism and ways people can engage in ethical action to create that change.
Mhm. Excellent. Well, I hope we'll get around to some of those today, Gabrielle, because I think that there are solutions. In fact, I meet people who are doing things, and those things are productive. And so I'm hoping to share some of those and to get your feedback and to find out maybe if there's some things that you've been trying, to any of the people on this Zoom conference. There may be things that they're trying or have tried, and maybe it almost worked really well, or didn't work at all. All of that's useful information. So I'm hoping we'll get some input. Carolyn, are you there?
I just heard the printer going.
Are you talking to me or the other Carolyn?
Yeah.
Carolyn Price.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I am here. It's a beautiful day, and I'm interested in this topic, but I have very little to add to it, being I live basically in a white community. We have a college, which has a lot of diversity, but if I don't go to the sporting events, which I don't, I will see some of the students at the YMCA, but very little interaction in these later years in my life. So I'm going to be mostly listening.
Okay, well, that's I mean, listening is good, and but I'm going to guess that you may have more to add than you think, because sometimes it's useful to hear what people have tried and how it worked or didn't work, and why they think it worked or didn't work. And so I think we don't hear, from my side, I think we don't hear enough about, from people who just say, well, I don't even know how to get started, or I tried this, but it didn't feel right for me or something. I think if we don't have that input, I think we're missing important information, So I'd like to hear what people, especially people who are earnest already, and they're, you're not dragging them to the table. They want to be there. They just don't know what to do, And I think that those those people's voices and feelings are critical on the road to progress here. And I see Jace is in the house. How are you doing, Jace?
Good morning, folks. Sorry, I almost forgot.
Well,
I
don't
was in-
forget today, because I know you have something to say.
Well, I'll get caught up here in a little bit.
Okay, all right. And
Thanks.
Jeanette, yeah, you bet. Jeanette, how are you feeling today? Well, if you don't feel, I should say this too, because I sometimes forget to say it. If you don't feel like talking, there's no pressure, but I want to have a strong invitation, because the value of this kind of program is your feedback and interaction with each other. The talking head thing, hey, there's so much of it, it's enough, so I have ideas, but I'm really interested in maybe using those ideas maybe to spark your ideas. But I think what you have to say is at least as important as whatever I'm going to add to this. With that, maybe we'll get started. Today's topic really is one that really is amazingly important in our society, yet one can get the feeling that we often don't know what we're talking about, and that's why we keep arguing, why we keep fighting, because it's one of those kind of things where the fundamental definitions of terms aren't agreed on, and so it's impossible to have a conversation if when I say rat, you think of an elephant, what I call an elephant, and the other guy thinks of a freight train, but we're all saying rat, so because we haven't agreed on, well, when I say rat, what in fact do I mean? And if I know that, even if it's different from me, from whatever definition I have, if I know that when you say that, you mean this, it's a little tricky to keep track of, but at least I know it's not what I'm thinking. And therefore, we may be saying the same thing in a different language, even though we're both speaking English, we may be saying the same thing, but we think it's different, or we feel different about that word, or that word has some trigger for person A that it does not have for person B. And so the emotional content, it keeps us from really connecting. All of that's in the mix. We're not going to get enough under the hood in this 1 hour program or so, but there are some key things that we can do today, and maybe a few new pieces of information that will help you to design your own solution. So I'm going to start off as I feel most relevant conversations should start off, or at least have in the mix somewhere. And that's a definition of terms, okay? Because if we don't have a definition of terms and we don't have an agreement on, well, what do we mean? Then I find it hard to see how we can have a practical, useful conversation. So the first question is, what do you call race? What do you call race?
I have a clarifying question with that. And this is only because of filling out, surveys and forms and things. There's always, it seems to be a two-part question. They say, what's your race? And what's your ethnicity? And
so you want to know what's the difference?
They're asking me two different questions when I'm filling out this paperwork.
Yeah. Okay, so we should say that one of the reasons And maybe this will kill the input. I hope not, though. One of the reasons you see that those two-part questions is because there are kind of two answers, right? And whatever answer you give depends on how you divide things. So one is race. That is the traditional thing that we talk about. But scientifically speaking, there is no such thing as race. So people defaulted to ethnicity, the word ethnicity, but it's like a euphemism for race. It's like if you say race, they think, okay, you're a Neanderthal, you're out of it. So they said, well, since we have to fill out these forms for Congress, how do we say it? But notice that the choices they give you are not, for example, ethnicity. That's like German or Bohemian or something like that, right? That's an ethnicity. But you'll notice on the forms, they rarely give you ethnicities. They don't have an ethnicity chart, because if they did, they'd have to have something the size of the telephone book, So it's just a euphemism for race. It's just like, well, let's not get into the argument. We'll give you your word. You can use ethnicity if you want, like when you go into the supermarket and they say ethnic food, it's like, what? What is lutefisk? Why is lutefisk not over here? And why is lefse not over here? That's ethnic food. So what do you mean when you say ethnic food? So anyway, that's the answer to that question. So anyone else, or Jessica, now that I've answered your clarifying question, what do you think race is?
I think it's a combination of, where a string of ancestors come from, and by ancestors I can mean just as recently as grandparents, great grandparents, where you grew up, the culture that you grew up in, and then I guess just how you personally are identifying with a word. So my word is white. That's what I am a white person, obviously. You look at my skin. I grew up in Midwest America. So the race that I see is like a Scandinavian, immigrant, homesteaded. They're all white skinned. We're all farmers. We live in the Midwest. That's my race.
Okay. So a white farmer is your race.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. That's a new one. I mean, they're gonna have to make that form bigger.
Right. Well, because or maybe I'm getting more too deep into culture, because I did live in Tennessee for a while, and that white person is a very different experience than my white experience.
Sure. That's another one of those things that makes the whole conversation rather interesting when you say, okay, you got this guy you call white who's in, like in Northern Ireland. Then you have this other guy that's in the hills of Tennessee, and then you say they're both white. Well, what do those guys have in common? Really?
Right.
Even culture,
Right. Yeah. So like I said, a lot of it initially, like if we're just doing really quick, like your brain's gonna try and stereotype and group to try and figure things out. I'm white. You look at me, she's a white girl, but I have a lot of different experiences than some other white girls,
Exactly. Yeah. That profiling can get really strange.
I think just kind of going off of what Jessica just said, I think there's Lee. Hold on one second, let me get her in. I think simply put, in my mind, race is a term that society created to lump everybody into a group that they think that they fit in, no matter what their experiences are, such as white, Black, Asian. I guess I just believe that race is just a term that society created, like to like Jessica said, to kind of judge us and put us into a group that they think we fit in, without really knowing where we come from or who we are.
Yeah. Or maybe even caring where you come from. It's like, we need-
Definitely not caring. Yeah.
we just need you to fit in this box. Yeah. Anyone else? What's your definition of race? That probably could be a whole thing by itself, but anybody else?
This is Gabrielle. Well, I
Sure.
think it's real problematic because I don't see myself as belonging to a race, but being a citizen of the Dakota Nation and being a citizen of America.
Hmm.
And I think when you talk about race, then you start creating categories of otherness that then some are more human than others, and some get more privilege.
Hmm.
That their otherness is more important in society.
Hmm.
And so then I think it's divisive and it doesn't bring people together as being one. We're one species.
Hmm.
And having those terms, race and ethnicity, it creates hostilities of difference, and instead of uniting people to be to recognize the diversity of human experience instead of putting people in categories. It doesn't celebrate that diversity and that uniqueness.
Hmm.
That's even within, like me being Dakota, there's diversity and of people even within that citizen group.
Hmm.
And so I think it really is a divisive term that doesn't allow us as citizens in this country where there's so much diversity to celebrate the uniqueness of being human
Hmm.
and the diversity and richness that is there. Instead, it's gives you a vision of hostilities and divisiveness. That's just my opinion.
Yeah. So I got a question for you, Gabriella. So would you say that there is a reality of division that race gives a name to, or would you say that race, the term race itself creates the division?
I think the term does.
Okay, so here's the problem. Okay, so words are symbols of thought. And
Right.
right? So if you don't have a thought, the word doesn't mean anything. For example, the word race also means like two animals, like a horse race, right?
Right.
So the word race by itself, it can mean all kinds of things. So how does that square with you say, well, the word creates the division?
It's how it's used in society.
Mm.
And I think I feel it a lot because you can accept somebody's a citizen of America or a citizen of England,
Mm.
but for tribal people, when you say you're a citizen of Standing Rock or wherever your citizenship is, then the next question is, well, how much of that are you? We
Yeah,
deal with blood quantums, like, well, am I not fully human? Or
yeah.
do Americans think of them as I'm only half American? I'm whatever ancestry I'm from, I'm so much of this and this and this. Do
Yeah.
people see themselves that way? And I doubt it.
Yeah. Well, this raises a very interesting, kind of a dilemma, because one tries to think, okay, well, how do I think of myself as a unique person and a culture that is unique, and where does that fit, with race and dividing things and stuff like that. So hold that thought, or if you have something else to say, fine. But I'm glad that you brought that out, because it is part of the dilemma that we have in dealing with with this issue is that different people have different ways that they think about the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else have a, you know, a definition of race or?
I think Lynn has something to say. He has his hand up there.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Lynn, go ahead.
Okay. I've thought about this for a long time. And what amazes me about this country is, like, we're talking terms. And like you said earlier, rat might mean something to somebody else different. I think America's problem is that when you ask somebody who they are, or say, I'm a German American, or I'm a Norwegian American, or I'm whatever, Asian American, the only people that say it right is the American Indian. Because we should say we're an American first, not second. Now, if we said we're American German, American Asian, American yada yada, then that first word is American, and that would put us together, not apart. So American needs to start saying who you are, not Native American, because people say, "Oh, I was born in this country, so I'm a Native American." No, you're an American Indian. You know, I'm a Nakota. The lady before was a Dakota, and there's Lakotas, etc., etc. But we're an American Nakota, an American Dakota, American Lakota. Because as a United States Marine Corps veteran, we're all green. And we got to watch how we speak to each other. But if we start using the term American first, which that's what everybody talks about nowadays. Excuse me, my voice is kind of bad. But I think that would help this country a lot, because my goal in life is to bring people together, not apart. And if we can start with using the word American first, yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very important and interesting insight. Anyone else? Anyone else?
I think if we look back, and especially where I come from, 150 years ago, we wouldn't have called it race, but Norwegians and Germans didn't get along, or Swedish and Irish, or whatever. We saw them as other. So it's kind of evolving all the time.
Well, that's a very interesting insight too, Carolyn, because that's one of the first things that I noticed when I moved to South Dakota over 30 years ago, is that when I talked to my neighbors, you know, many of them reflected on the fact, you know, when we talk about race issues, they talked about how, for example, in Roslyn, most of the people, the settlement was from Norway, and in Grenville, they were mostly from Poland or someplace, you know, Slavic. And then in Eden, it was mostly Germans. And we had kind of free-flowing conversations with the old people about how, when they were younger, that if you were Norwegian, you couldn't go to if you went through a town, like that wasn't Norwegian. If you got off the road and went into Eden, there was a good chance you would get beat up, you know, or going to, or some of my friends now say, oh, you know, like if we were Danish, we couldn't date a Finnish guy, you know, I mean, and so those kind of divisions were as deep as what we call race divisions now. So I think that's a real important insight to bring to this conversation. And that's why I start off with, well, what do you call race? Because some of the things that people experience as racism, you know, they were experiencing within that race because they were from different places.
Yes.
You know?
So my parents had a mixed marriage because dad was Norwegian and mom was English Irish, and his family did not accept her at first.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's a very important insight to keep, because it tells us something about the underlying things that it may in fact not be about skin color at all. It may be something a lot deeper than that. Anyone else have some idea of something to add about what they feel is race? Well, if you think of something, please add it to the conversation. My next question is, why do you think that the issue of race dominates so much of American life? It's hard to think of any particular issue that doesn't have what appears to be a racial component. Okay, and I say appears to be because I have a sneaking suspicion that it isn't about race at all, but we perceive it as a racial issue. So that's why I'm asking the question, why does race or the divisions between people, why is that so important to us as Americans? Which group you belong to, and how you classify yourself.
I'm going to step in here. I was late in
Sure,
the first part.
sure.
I think that's what we're talking about. What is innate or are human beings as such? And maybe it's the animal world, a larger picture. If something is not familiar, is different in any way, shape, or form, we question it.
Mm.
We avoid it.
Mm.
And just that has not just started here today or 100 years ago. There have been differences and wars since the beginning of history as far as I've studied. So why is that? Is it the unknown, unfamiliar? I think it's a huge picture. And I agree with the gentleman, I don't know his name, that said something about the word race at the beginning, about the word. But we as human beings put words with things to give them meanings, and they aren't always the wisest choice because we are judgmental, bad, good, red, blue. Just think of how we've come our language in the last, 30 years of using very divisive language and showing the anger or the favoritism of it. Man, woman, adult, child. I just think we need to think of, in some way, becoming aware of how we treat others and other things, our respect for humanity, for our environment. And I'll get off my stool.
No, well, but I have a question. I'll pose it to you, but I'd like to open it up to our whole group here. Is one of the things that keeps coming up in the discussion so far is the word divisive. Okay, so I'm having some difficulty understanding what people mean when they say divisive. For example, if um, if we have a need to have, you know, an identity, okay, and if we have this history of, you know, being divided into races, how is it that calling it becomes divisive? Should we not, you know, should we not acknowledge how, just kind of what you were saying, like, okay, we see the other as a threat. Okay, should we not acknowledge where we are in the country, you know, in terms of, so if we don't say that, does it, is there a feeling, you know, is it possible that by just not mentioning race, that it will go away? I mean, will, because it seems that we had the division before we had a word for it, but I could be wrong. Maybe, you know, maybe there's something I'm not seeing.
Very good point. Very good point. And then, is there another word that could be used? And to stress, how about united, like starting the United States?
Mhm. Well,
How
I,
about acceptance? How about stressing the positive? Think about what is emphasized in different periods of history, even in
Well,
our time.
No, I think that's a good
Stress.
point, because this is Gabrielle. Because you know, somebody talked about, you know, when you cross social boundaries, that you're expecting to be met with hostile behavior instead of kindnesses. And when you do experience kindness, then people are surprised by that, and we shouldn't be. That should just be the norm.
well, I want to bring up maybe a point. I hadn't planned to bring this up, but, you know, if we look at the word diversity, it sounds like we're trying to make sure all of the parts come together, but not be unified. So suppose, let's say the opposite of that is university. Okay. So it seems like people are more emotionally, let's say, invested in diversity than they are university. In other words, I want everybody to come together, but I want to be able to make divisions between people, you know. As individuals, I can see, well, you're over there and I'm over here, so I can make that. But then when we get into groups, if we're going to be diverse, it suggests that we want kind of like little boxes to put people in, so that when I tell you I'm in that box, there, I want you to assume certain things about me or something. So I'm kind of mixed up as to what people are feeling when they desire diversity. So maybe somebody could enlighten me.
Lawrence,
Yeah,
this is Jace.
yeah, sure.
I'm just thinking about the terms, the terminology. I think is really, like you said, the key point of what is race, what is ethnicity. Are we all ethnocentric? Yeah, we are. We pretty much are, because identity, because we want to be thought of as unique, as special, as part of society, but also we do not want to lose our identity as a particular person from a group of people who believe this way. And so it's the word that I've been trying to use more is inclusiveness, because inclusive implies not only just inclusiveness of human beings and the other, but again, going back on how we as Lakota people, we look upon our terminology kind of the same way. For example, we have a term oyate, and oyate can mean, depending on how you use it, can mean people, or in other words, you can be talking about the people, the two-legged, the human beings, or you can mean oyate as nations. So we can talk about not only the human two-legged, but the animals, or like the elk nation, or the things that fly. We can even talk about the water nation, the rivers and waterways and so forth. And so nation can be, oyate can mean people or nation. And so, but that implies then that those things are all equal. They are not, one is not better, one is not less, one is not inferior, but we are equal and part of this universe and part of this world. And so we are inclusive. We include all of these elements of Mother Earth and or Grandmother Earth, and we are part of this world as equals, not just human beings as two-legged, but everything in the universe. So if you think about your worldview as inclusive, incorporating all of these elements, you have a different kind of outlook on life. I think back in the day, the anthropologists, or I don't know, scientists, some people looked upon different groups of people trying to get a better idea of who's who in the zoo, kind of thing. Who the Mongoloids, the Caucasoids, the people that came from certain areas of the world, geographic areas, and tried to make some sense of who we are as a human race. And that's obviously it's an outdated term, and race has a real way of bringing about different kinds of thoughts, many different kinds of thoughts, and that's what's coming out as we are visiting today. But terminology, I think, is important, and I will say something, since I'm on now, and we'll probably run out of time. I did think about race as part of, I did a little handout on the medicine wheel, the healing wheel, and for different groups, different students wanted to have something that tangible that they could think about when they think about the medicine wheel or the hoop of life. And so I had always thought of it as the four nations of man, or the four races of man: black, red, yellow, white, and like that. And that's kind of how I came from. I was taught that we are all equal in that medicine wheel. But then in more recent times, I've changed that to say, instead of the races of man, or man, that's humankind, I decided to put diversity of nations, because I went back again to the Lakota thought of, well, nations incorporates not only two-leggeds, but it can be the plant nation, or it can be the bird nation, or the elk, like I said before, the deer nation, whatever. So that I changed that in these times then, to not use the term race, but to use nations. Anyway, just my thoughts about word usage.
That is a very important note to make, Jace. And I will point out that if you look at least if you look at biblical terms, and I'm not promoting the Bible, but I think many people in this country know the Bible. So if you look at biblical terms, you will see sometimes the word race, but it's a poor translation. because there was no concept of race when the Bible was written. People had nation states. That was a big thing. And once you were absorbed into a nation state, you might have different status in that nation state. But let's say in Rome, you're a citizen or not a citizen. But the idea of race, you won't find except for less than 300 years old, okay? And it was a completely constructed idea, didn't exist before. And nobody thought of it because people hadn't gone far enough anyway to see all these different people. And so you go from a place like Africa, and then you go to Papua New Guinea, and you see these people who look almost to you identical. And you can't explain, if we're just now getting here, how did those people get from here?
You're frozen, Lawrence.
I think you might be having some internet issues because I can see everyone else still moving.
Yeah, Lawrence is frozen.
All right, let's give him a moment. We'll see what happens. He might be getting logged back in.
Yeah, he's logged out, so we'll see if he can jump back in quick here.
Yep.
How fun this is. Good old internet.
Yes, well, we can digest some of the information we've been talking about, maybe.
While we wait for Lawrence to hopefully come back on, I'll just re-ask a question that he asked because I'm genuinely curious what your guys' thoughts are. And the question that he asked that we kind of got sidetracked from is, why do you think that race dominates life in America these days? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, and I personally think that a big part of the problem is that not everybody, people seem to want to have somebody else to blame. And so I think if they can lump us together into groups and then just always going to blame this group for this problem and this group for that problem. But I really think that we've fallen into a trap where everybody's looking for somebody else to blame. And it's just easy to lump us together and say that it's all your fault, all these people's fault. That's just my opinion, but.
I think part of it is our constant media coverage 24/7. So there's certain things that are made of more importance probably than they are. And it's like anything else, it grows and it goes to extremes. And that extremist of whatever it is can be sometimes very helpful, but sometimes extremely harmful as humans. And I've heard people say that they turn off their TV or they put their cell phone down and one day they don't use it as a family, and how it's caused them to realize how we have been manipulated unknowingly about these actions toward us. I was just hearing about some famous writer for the Atlantic that was addicted to Twitter. And it was just on this morning's news. The lady was, last name was Flamingo. And how her children told her, they said, you're on Twitter all the time. It's like you can't leave it alone. I think we have our host back again, and
Yeah.
I was just blabbing. So anyway, I'll get,
Yeah, I didn't mean to take over your show, Lawrence. I just re-asked your
No.
question. Why does race dominate in America? And along the lines of what you're saying, Lee, I was just thinking, I wonder if social media is just this huge thing that like I didn't grow up with, but my kids have never lived without some social media influence. That they've always had that. And then you have these social media influencers, right? And they get to be such a big part of that generation's lives. And so what they say is the only thing that these kids are hearing and learning. And a lot of social media influencers these days are really big on the race issues, but it's not necessarily the positive race issues that we have. It's not that they're trying to help solve the race issues. Some of them feel like they're trying to provoke the race issues, in my opinion. And unfortunately, my kids' generation, and then I'm sure their kids' generation is just going to progress and progress. That's their news, which isn't necessarily good, but I think that that's a huge part of how that race dominates in our society today too.
This
Well,
is Gabrielle.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, the elephant in the room, is how America was capable of doing some really monstrous and cruel things to people in the name of race. And we haven't faced that as a country. And we haven't called it what it was, those cruelties. And it came from ideas of race. And although, society's evolved and changed in a lot of ways, that's still those cruelties, and they were horrible cruelties. And sometimes we see vestiges of them in society today, like what's happened with some police forces in Minneapolis and other places. We haven't faced how we've used race in this country to commit cruelties that, for a society that has all these really good things in it, how we were still capable of having those things occur in our society.
Well, I think what in my experience, and sorry about, I don't know what happened with my thing, it just kind of lost the connection. But my experience in moving around the world is that I've never been to a place where they didn't have a similar out group, even in a homogeneous place like Japan, where you would think that all the people are Japanese, but they have the Buraku people. And long story short, I learned of the Buraku people because one of my friends, a woman, her father was the head of the Buraku movement, and it was something like the NAACP in Japan. And they looked to Martin Luther King as a kind of almost an icon to say, this is how we should get our civil rights, And so we bonded on that, and we had lots of conversations about the history of that. But since we're running out of time, one of the things I would like to do to make this more useful, especially given some of the points that have been made here today, it's like, well, how do we go forward? You know, what do we do next? I think if you look in the chat, I put in a couple of links, and they're to a news article that's basically saying the same thing because it comes from the same research. But if you don't have a subscription to the Post, you might be blocked out. You might have a paywall, you know. But if you look on that, if you look at those articles, basically what they're saying is that most people in America, they don't have any friends or relationships with people who are not just like them. And to me, that is the thing that will break down a lot of the barriers that we've been talking about, because many of the things we can't do much about, at least on an individual level. But what we can do is we can reach out and make a point to have friends in other places, and not just my Indian friend, you know, or my Black friend, but my friend, and maybe at some point relatives. Many of us have people who are one of the extended relatives, but we just never talk to them. Okay. So my suggestion, or what I see as a solution, or the first step, is for us to just sort of tune our mind to like, okay, maybe I could be more inclusive, as someone pointed out is a good word to use, inclusiveness. Maybe I can be inclusive myself. Maybe, I can invite people to my church. Maybe I can invite, and then once, that's a safe space. And then once I get to know them, then maybe we can have a party together, or we can go shopping together, or we can go driving in a park together, or something we do together. Because to me, this article saying that about 75% of Americans don't have anybody in their social group that doesn't more or less look like them. To me, that gets to the crux of the problem. We can have all the programs we want. We can even make up new, nicer words to say, but nothing changes until it changes in us. Nothing changes until when I look at you, I don't see a white person. I don't see a Indian person. I see my friend. I see a person, right? So because we need practice to get out of this mindset that people are divided by races or whatever other things we're dividing ourselves with. We need practice. We just can't say it and have it in the mental thing. We got to get it in our heart, We have to feel it. And we can't feel it if we don't practice it. At least I'm not seeing how we could do that, So that's in the few minutes we have, that's a key thing that I wanted to bring today as a potential solution. Anyone else have any other thing that they think might help that an individual can do, as opposed to saying the nation should do this? Well, that's a big chunk of cheese to swallow, because but we can do something ourselves. So I'm not saying those things aren't important too. I'm just saying, like, we can take the freedom to act independently on this issue. Anyone have any other ideas about how we might be able to do that as individuals?
Or we can see that I see that person looks different than me, but that's okay. I think it would be very, very boring if everybody looked about like me. Yikes.
Yeah. But how do
It's,
you,
it's okay if people are different.
yeah, after you say that though, Jace, how do you feel differently about it? Not just think differently. And I say that because human beings are feeling beings that think, not thinking beings that feel. And so I think a lot of times we tell ourselves, oh, I'm not a racist, you know, but then we go and do racist things you know, because we haven't changed our feeling.
Well,
So
I feel that they are similar to me because they're two-legged, they're human beings, but they look different and that's okay.
yes.
And they talk different and that's okay because they you know, they even saying that the other they but is not better than me, but is not, you know, and I'm not better than them. We are on the same planet here, and I think we should hold one another up as human beings and as friends or lovers or mothers or whatever your relationship is with that person, and hold them up instead of trying to bring them down. We should hold one another up more, I guess.
Well, I think this deserves another try at some point. I hope you will think about some of the things that we've talked about today and see if you can come up with some of your own ideas about how you might, and then others can sort of riff off of what you're doing, how you might like include more people who don't look like you in your circle, or maybe have even different religions, because it gets sometimes down to that too. People who are just outside of your circle, how do you bring more people into your circle and make your circle more universal? Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, everybody, for your participation in this discussion. And we'll see you same time, same station next week on a brand new show.
Have a good day, folks.
Okay, bye.